You're watching The Penny Hardaway Show, presented by Cook's Pest Control.
It's the 30th anniversary of the Tigers' Elite Eight run. Penny Hardaway reflects on the 91-92 season, plus the science behind the Tigers' strength and conditioning. That's all coming up tonight on The Penny Hardaway Show.
The game is on.
The Penny Hardaway Show is presented by Cook's Pest Control. You don't have to live with pests. Call Cook's Pest Control and get a free quote today. Conway Services, the official HVAC partner of Tiger Athletics. Tiger Bookstore, the official merchandiser for Tiger Athletics. AutoZone, when you've got car trouble, you want help from number one. Get in the zone, AutoZone. And is supported by your Memphis area Toyota dealers.
Another twist and turn in this crazy season. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Woloshin. No Cincinnati, but there was a UCF game. Let's look at the highlights with Cassie Carlson.
Winter weather across the country causing the Thursday game at Cincinnati to be postponed to February 15th, so only one matchup for the Tigers, hosting UCF and getting back a lot of key pieces. Duran, Williams, Nolly, and Hardaway returning from injuries. Meanwhile, Amani Bates out. The Tigers get off to a fast start as the shot clock expires. Lester Quinones lets off a three, and that sets the tone. Then comes the Duran factor, throwing up a baseline J, some of that behind-the-scenes NBA development showing up in a game, and then his favorite, swatting shots on the defensive end, adding the snarl right after. Later on, Alex Lomax putting on the joggles for this lob to Duran for the alley-oop slam. He threw that from beyond the arc. Fellow freshman Josh Minot coming off the bench and adding a team-high 16, catching this laser no-look pass from Tyler Harris and finishing at the rim as the Tigers get revenge over UCF 88-60 final to win their third straight. This week's outstanding performance goes to Jalen Duran, recording his third career double-double in his return, feasting at the rim, dunks all night long, finishing with 14 and 10. He also is our defensive player of the week, a force protecting the rim, 2 blocks and a steal to make his presence known. Time to hear from Penny Hardaway about the 30th anniversary of his Tigers team's run to the Elite Eight.
Time sure flies by, Coach. Passing by the Larry Finch statue today, it reminded me 30 years ago, the Tigers had this great team. They go all the way to the Elite Eight, except for one problem, the Cincinnati Bearcats.
Yeah, that was a magical run. It was the most fun I've ever had in basketball with going to the Elite Eight, but we ran into a conference foe in the Cincinnati Bearcats, and they had our number.
How much do those games, those losses, stick with you to this day?
Oh, they still stick with me to this day because it was a game that we really wanted to win, obviously because they owned us during the season. And not to be able to get over the hump, and we got blown out. I think we lost by 31 points to them in that Elite Eight game. It was still devastating to this day.
As I think about it, Coach, the first game you played against them was a really good game. This is the most amazing thing about that series. They won all 4, and each game was by a bigger margin of victory. As you look back with a coach's eye, what do you think happened there?
Well, I think they really game planned me really well. Those 4 games. They didn't want me to beat them. They wanted the other guys to beat them, and that's not knocking any of my teammates, but they tried to take me out of the game. It was 5 against 1 pretty much when I got the ball in my hand, and whenever I made plays, we didn't make the plays that we needed to make, and I guess I didn't do enough to try to get to the foul line, but they did a great job as a team of just taking me out of the game.
What do you remember about just the moment of making it to the Elite Eight and the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I remember just having to beat some giants. I mean, the first game was Pepperdine. They had Doug Christie. He got drafted into the NBA. The second game was against Arkansas with Todd Day, who was from Memphis, Lee Mayberry, and Oliver Miller. And the third game was against Georgia Tech, who had 3 or 4 pros, Travis Best, John Barry, Malcolm Mackey, and all those guys. So it was an amazing run, and every week and every game was more fun.
Arkansas was the number 3 team in the country that year too, or the number 3 seed for that. They were up in the top 10 for much of the year. What are your recollections with that great rivalry with them and with Todd Day?
Yeah, I remember beating them earlier in the year at the Pyramid. It was a great game, and we beat them there. So the second game, they were saying that we weren't going to beat them 2 times in one season. And knowing that Todd was from Memphis and wanting to beat us, especially when it counted, that's definitely what I remember the most.
With that team too, most of you guys were from Memphis, and that's kind of similar to how some of your teams here have been. What's it like to represent with a whole team that is playing for a city that they grew up in?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing, and I brag on that a lot. It wasn't that we couldn't recruit out of the area, it's that the better talent was in our city and in our area. So to have a team full of Memphis guys representing the city, we understood the magnitude of what was going on, and we were very conscious of how the fans felt. And we knew that they wanted a championship and we wanted one as well. So we grew up being Memphis Tiger fans, and to be in a uniform was just even better.
On that team, not from Memphis, but a big connection, was David Vaughn, the nephew of Larry Finch. And he had a great year that year. You guys had an instant connection.
Yeah, well, Nashville is right down the road, so we still put him into the Memphis fold. But David and I clicked right away. We definitely had the chemistry of two guys that were very unselfish, that really wanted to just win. And we played really well together.
Can you update us on David? Because he's had some down times. I think he's back on the rise, though.
Yeah, David came here for the Memphis Madness, so it was very good to see him around. I don't think a lot of people know who he is, but man, he could really play basketball.
How did Coach Finch get the most out of that group?
Coach Finch was demanding, but he was also fair. And the way he got the most out of us was basically to tell us how he did it and how his group did it when they made it to the finals, and what the city expected and what he expected. And his competitive nature really, it drove us to just want to be great.
When you think about Coach Finch, what are the biggest characteristics you think you've adopted in running your own team?
Family, competitive nature, accountability, always being held himself accountable for a lot of the things that we did wrong, which he should not have, because he was like, I'm the head and it goes through me. But those things are like the characteristics, that I just took from him, because he wanted to be a family. He treated everyone the same. He pushed very hard with his competitive nature because he was a competitor, and he held everyone accountable.
I think you told a story that he basically told you were going to come to Memphis. What was that?
Yeah, I was during my recruitment, and he knew my grandmother pretty well from the school system. I think he was working at White Station Middle at some time, or doing something at White Station Middle, and knew my grandmother that worked in the school system. And when he met me and started talking to me about recruitment, he was like, boy, you're coming to Memphis. And that's all it took.
Say
He
less.
didn't even have to really recruit me. Boy, you're coming to Memphis.
When you said, Coach, I'm going to leave, I'm going to go to the NBA, he knew this was coming, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But what were his thoughts with you then?
He didn't really believe it. I called him on the phone, and he was like, stop joking around, and then kind of hung the phone up. And I called him back. I was like, Coach, I'm serious. I need to come over and talk to you. And I went over and talked to him, and he wasn't happy, but he understood. He felt like he needed me for one more year.
You also have a relationship with his wife, and you surprised her with an NIT championship ring. Why was that so important?
Yeah, Mrs. Finch she's still the mother of all of us, because of back in the day how she took care of our team and all of the other teams. And I thought it was so important because she was so vital in our run and in Memphis basketball, and especially University of Memphis and Memphis State basketball. I just thought it was so important to give her a ring.
Since you talk family and obviously Vicki Finch, and I know that meant a lot to her, I'm sure, you watched how Larry had to treat his nephew, and I always thought he was a little tougher on him because he wanted to prove to the team no favorites. How have you done that with Jaden and having to coach your own son?
Yeah, I was tough on him early, because I wanted to see him succeed, but now he's getting older, he knows more. It's more of a friendship, partnership kind of. I'm not as hard on him. I still will push him, but it's not the same. Early on, I was really tough on him.
How the Tigers develop and sustain their bodies for a long basketball career right after this.
You're watching The Penny Hardaway Show, presented by Cook's Pest Control.
It's not as simple as reps on a weight rack. There's a science behind Rob Hornet's strength and conditioning program.
Inside Access is presented by Memphis Toyota Dealers.
Let's start with how you got into strength and conditioning.
It was, a love affair. My brother was the captain of the football team when I was a young kid. I was in probably fourth or fifth grade. My brother was a senior in high school. He was really dedicated to the weight room. I saw what it did for him in his sport, being an undersized player, and that kind of harbored my passion for what I wanted to do. So from 3rd grade on, I was lifting with the high school football team, which was pretty rare for a young kid to do that. From then on, I continued my passion for it. My high school strength coach was the USA's strongest man at the time. So having that and then seeing what he could do, and then I could realize that could be a passion for in a career.
You've been in the NBA and now you're here at Memphis. Yep. How did that shape how you prepare these guys at the college level?
The unique part of it, I had a really good mentor. Is the longest tenured strength coach in the NBA named Sean Wendell with the Indiana Pacers. He's been there, I think, 18 years now. The big thing that set him apart from other strength coaches in the NBA setting is just his relationships. If you don't have a relationship with your athlete, you're not going to be able to get them to do what they want to do.
So the relationship part is important at the college level. You're still getting them in their early development stage, correct?
Yeah, and that's why I like the college game more than I like the professional, because I get them sometimes, I can get them maybe for 6 months, like we have some guys on our team, or I can have a guy I can have for 4 to 5 years. So getting them and then help them develop their daily motivation of how they're going to go about a day, a week, a year is the thing that really gets me going when what I want to do. Is I can have them for 4 years develop all these qualities. And when I have a recruit come in, I tell them the same thing. I'm not going to throw trigonometry at you if you don't know basic math.
So correct me if I'm wrong, is this way more scientific than it appears from the outside?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people see like 1980s football training with Nebraska football where everybody's doing the same thing. Everything's going to be based around them as an individual and their needs. We have Tyler Harris, who's a 5'8" shooting guard on our team, and then you have Josh Minor, who's a 6'9" baby giraffe, who's a first year in the program. So everything's going to be tailored around them as an individual and what they can and cannot do. If somebody cannot get into a position that I want them to do, I'm not going to put a square peg into a round hole to make them do something they cannot do. Everything's going to be based on the assessment. So I'll bring them in. If I don't, I'm just like a doctor. Like I'm going to check your blood work before I do anything else. So from that standpoint, we have tables over here that I put them on a table. I check everything from big toe mobility to neck flexion extension. And then I have a thing called FMS, which helps me develop a program based on what I think their movement qualities are. So if somebody's a bad mover, I'm going to say, okay, we need to fix this. If they lack ankle mobility, we need to improve that. And then now we have force plate and some other technologies that Coach Hardaway's let me get here that's going to help us develop a program even a little more scientific than just saying, hey, we can tell you lack internal rotation of your shoulder, external rotation of your shoulder, but how you develop force and how you absorb force is going to help me develop a program around you. So a big example I'd say was Josh Minot, and everybody's talking about Josh now, but I call him a baby giraffe when he comes in his development. But he's going to continue to evolve, but I'm not going to throw something very advanced at him yet until I've squeezed everything out of that lemon with him. So I'm going to get everything out of him before I go to the next category of training with him. So very foundational movements. It's nothing fancy from a beginner standpoint, but he's evolving through that. And we're going to continue to evolve them through that process as we go through it.
You mentioned the technology, stuff that Penny obviously invests in and sees value in. What are some of the cool things that you have at your fingertips?
So right now we have a technology that was actually widely used during COVID, but it was a Connexon. So it's a GPS for layman's terms that will go into a player's uniform and we can manage loads once we're in season. So the big thing is once somebody does get injured, or if it does happen, we can manage a load to see what they were hitting previously before injury, in practice, in game, and then we can write a program based on what they need to hit before they get back to their next game. So if somebody is hitting, I'll just say an arbitrary number of 150, we want to build them in at a 50% rate and then a 10% increase from each practice to practice, and then kind of periodize it. I always say we're kind of like a pharmacist. We're giving you a dosage each day, and we're slowly building a tolerance to that as we go through it. So that's one piece of technology that we're using now. Another one we just got, we have a thing called a force plate in here that we'll use another thing to see what we're doing from a programming standpoint, from a strength perspective and a speed perspective, to see if what we're doing in here is actually making an increase to our athletes. And then it'll also show us same thing coming back from injury, so that we can actually make a program to see where they were pre-injury and get them back to that point as well. And then we can also see how fatigued they are in season from this as well. So it's a caveat of a lot of things that we can use that's going to help us develop a program around them as an individual, and then help me tell the coaching staff, hey, this is what we need to work on with this athlete. Hopefully we're all on the same page. This is what we need to do. And I'm educating them on the process of, after they're gone from here, I'm teaching them tools that they'll use the rest of their life, even if they're not playing basketball. I try to teach to them in scientific terms. So I'll say dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. They'll make fun of me for it now. I'll say internal rotation, external rotation. And the big thing I tell recruits when they come in as well is I'm going to talk to you in a term that's going to help you if you're playing in Yugoslavia or you're playing in the United States. I'm going to teach you scientific terminology that if you do have an injury or you're out and you're trying to train yourself, that it's going to help you going forward. So one's relationships, the number one thing that I build with these guys, and then two is teaching them the process of why we do the things we do, and then just have fun while they're in here.
The coach that spends the most time with basketball players is the strength and conditioning coach. How important is Rob Hornet to your program?
Rob is very important because he gets the guys ready and mentally ready and physically ready to come into the gym and ready to practice. He works on their bodies, he works on their minds. He knows when to push, when not to push, so he's very important.
He mentioned that you're all for investing in the technology of the strength and conditioning and weight training. Is that something that you've known from the NBA, or why is that so important to you?
Yeah, I brought that concept from the NBA because everything that's needed now, the guys really need it. It's not that you're just putting machines in there just to look good. We know about the bench press, we know about all that other stuff, but there's other machines that can take the load off of your knees, which I had knee injuries, so I'm very well aware of that. So coming from the NBA, Rob comes to me and talks to me about load management and what we need to try to help in these areas. I go out and try to raise the money or help raise the money to get those machines.
I remember when Josh Pastner was here, times were changing. He brought in the guy Frank Mastriani from the Bay Area. He had this like huge staircase that was at the finish line. I don't know whatever happened to that thing, but I guess I'm going back to how strength and conditioning has changed over all the years.
Yeah, it's changed more from being so much heavy weight to more body weight, to more bands, to more stretching, to more dynamic things instead of just the pounding of just lifting heavy weights, and it's just making guys last a little longer out on the court.
What initially attracted you to Rob Hornet when you brought him in August?
Yeah, I interviewed a ton of guys, but what interested me in Rob was his military background. I'm all about being diligent and being stern and having some order. And that's what he was about with the military background, and he worked really hard, so that definitely intrigued me.
The workouts themselves, how much different are they from, say, a year ago with your past strength coach?
Yeah, well, everybody's going to be different because Darby Rich he had his own style. Rob has his own style. They're definitely different because Rob's mindset is different, but the exercises that they do are pretty much the same. It's just different variations of how they do them.
Tigers look for revenge over Tulane and finally get Houston. We'll preview the games right after this.
You're watching the Penny Hardaway Show, presented by Cook's Pest Control. Let's take a look at the AutoZone road ahead.
2 games this week, Coach. The first one at home. It's revenge again, this time with a Tulane team that is surprising everybody.
When we went there, it was the first game off of our COVID pause, and we didn't have our troops together this time around. Well, hopefully we'll be fully healthy, and it will be a revenge game for sure.
Then you finally get Houston. They always seem to be later in the season, but you have to go to Houston first. What do you see from the Cougars this season?
Yeah, they're playing hard. You know, their culture is set. You know, they have their 2 best players out, and they're still winning. They're still winning at a high clip, and it's because Coach Sampson he has a no-nonsense type of coaching method, and the guys respond to that, and it's always great to go to Houston. I love those games.
Coach Sampson has done a remarkable job of really adjusting to those injuries, changing the way that their style is.
Yeah, they went out and got Josh Carlton, their big man. They went out and got him, and they changed up how they played because everything was always pick and roll oriented. Now they're throwing the ball in the post to him pretty much 50% of the time down the floor. During the game, and he's capitalizing. So, that makes him a bigger threat inside and outside this year.
That was tonight's AutoZone Road Ahead. AutoZone, America's #1 battery destination and official sponsor of Tiger Athletics. Get in the zone, AutoZone.
Houston has definitely become the Tigers' barometer game. Stick around, we'll put a wrap on this one in just a minute.
You're watching the Penny Hardaway Show, presented by Cook's Pest Control.
Thanks so much for staying up late and watching. We'll see you again next week for another edition of the Penny Hardaway Show.
The Penny Hardaway Show is presented by Cook's Pest Control. You don't have to live with pests. Call Cook's Pest Control and get a free quote today. Conway Services, the official HVAC partner of Tiger Athletics. Tiger Bookstore, the official merchandiser for Tiger Athletics. AutoZone, when you've got car trouble, you want help from #1. Get in the zone, AutoZone. and is supported by your Memphis area Toyota dealers. The preceding has been a Learfield presentation of the University of Memphis Sports Network. This copyrighted telecast is an exclusive presentation of Learfield under the broadcasting rights granted by the University of Memphis. Reuse of this presentation is prohibited without the expressed written consent of the University of Memphis and Learfield.